Welcome to the Accidental Business Owner podcast, the show that lifts the lid on what it really takes to grow, scale and successfully exit your business without losing your sanity, soul or savings. Real stories, raw lessons, proven strategies. Let's dive into this week's episode. Hi, I'm Jay Allen from the Accidental Business Owner podcast, and today I want to share with you about living your legacy. About a year ago now, I was sat having lunch with a former client called Charles. Charles had been a client probably about 5, maybe 6 years earlier. And we'd spent time, initially he'd joined my Explorer Mastermind group, which has subsequently been rebranded, is now called the Battlefields to Boardroom Mastermind. But had spent time in our Explorer Mastermind group and then subsequently elevated into our one-to-one summit package in order to be able to help him support and grow and then subsequently exit his business. And Charles had worked with us initially in Mastermind and then subsequently through one-to-one work to identify that at 50 years old, he wanted to be able to start thinking about spending more time back at home with his wife and his growing family and less time working in the office. He'd built a reasonably sized digital agency. He'd got a large team of staff that had just about hit to about 30, I think it was about 31 staff when he made the decision that it was time for him to be able to hand over the reins. And over the next 15 months, we supported Charles to be able to build the business and to review and revise the business and then do what's called an MBO or a management buyout, where we'd identified 4 members of the senior leadership team within his business, the 4 department heads who had got an interest not only in simply remaining within the business, but were open to being able to take it on and buy it off Charles and allow him to retire. And so we'd structured a deal that enabled them to be able to put in a little bit of their own money, sufficient to be able to have some, as we call it, skin in the game, but to subsequently to be able to borrow some money to be able to give Charles a good send-off on the day of transition, and then to continue to drip feed Charles a quarterly sum of money over the next 4 years to eventually buy the business over that 4-year period. It was a sufficient enough time for them to be able to afford to be able to do so, and for Charles to slowly relinquish share value and relinquish responsibility as he handed over the reins to the next generation. And what was interesting, or I found particular of interest during that deal, was Charles was 51, I think it was, by the time he'd finally signed the final paperwork and was able to walk away, cease to be the chairman of the business and go on to be a retired former business owner. And the 4 members of the team that had initially been recruited by him and trained by him and subsequently became team leaders as the business starts to evolve and became department heads and then eventually to purchase it off him. The difference in age between Charles at 51 and his leadership team was about 20 years. The average age of his leadership team was 32. We got some young, really hungry, very innovative new blood into the business that was going to take it into not necessarily a completely different direction, but with a different tact, a different ownership, a different era. And Charles had identified that it was time for him to be able to either embrace technology a lot more than he had done previously, right at the very start of AI and the AI journey that we are now all on. And to say, do you know what, I've done my bit. It's time to allow the next generations to see where they then take it and to be able to bow out gracefully and to live his legacy, to be able to demonstrate what it takes to be able to to do that sale, not just physically, but mentally, to be able to let go of being the business owner, the founder of the business, and to become a former business owner, not even the CEO, but a former business owner. And the transition that he went through over that period of time to be able to move comfortably and gracefully from being a CEO, from being a managing director to a CEO, to a caretaker, and subsequently retired at 51. And then to see the evolution of people that had subsequently applied for a job with him and become a team leader, and then a department manager, head of sales or head of finance, and then subsequently take on that directorship responsibility. But what was important to me, and what I wanted to be able to share with you today, is it shouldn't take till he gets to 51 and a change of circumstances. For him, it was wanting to spend more time with his family. He'd recognised the sacrifice that he'd made in his 30s and 40s by being so involved in the business to grow it to the size that it had become, that he almost felt he was repenting. He almost felt that there was the need to be able to give back for all of those time that he'd missed. And it made me really realise that the importance of having an exit plan is so much more critical from the moment that you employ your first member of staff. The moment it goes from solopreneur, the moment it goes from trying it, from giving it a go, from earning a few quid to generating an income from yourself, the moment you've gone from a job or self-employed into becoming an employer, from that moment onwards, you really ought to be giving considerations to, and how much longer do I want to be owning this? And what's the lifetime value or the lifetime opportunity of this business? I've watched in the papers and the press recently about the change in VAT thresholds for people with their kids in private education, and how as a result of that, the big slump in the amount of parents able to be able to put their kids through private education, and some of the private education establishments having to close because they're no longer cost effective to be able to run, with the lack of numbers, with the lower intake of the amount of people applying for places. Some of these schools that have been trading for not just 100, 150, I saw one the other day, 189 years old, will close its doors at the end of June next year, having determined that it's no longer cost effective for them to be able to operate the business as is. It's run its course after 190 years. Well, why that's relevant to you is there is less and less chance of your employees turning up on a Monday morning every single week and doing a damn good job, as they so well should, and I'm no doubt do, if the motive to do so is one day you're going to retire, and as a result of that, leave them high and dry. Where's the motive at all as an employee if your goal is to retire before you're 67 and it leaves them uncertain about their future? I remember one of the first jobs I ever had. It was a cash-in-hand job for a summer job whilst I was still at school. It was somewhere between 14 and 15 or 15 and 16, and there was a local warehouse close to where we are that was just operating and looking for manual labour over the summer holidays. And me and a couple of friends from school applied for the job, went in one day and said, I understand you're looking for some skilled labour, some muscle. Can you pull that, lad? You're on. You start tomorrow. That was about the size of the interview, and 3 or 4 of us were responsible for moving pallets from one side of the warehouse to the other and then stacking them. And that's all we were responsible for doing. I don't think they had a forklift available, and all we were responsible for doing is moving stock, either full pallets or empty pallets, and we were going to get paid a few quid, cash in hand, over a summer period. But I also remember that the owner drove a very, very, very posh, expensive flash car. I couldn't remember to the life of me today as to what it was, but he certainly had something. Might have been a pink Lamborghini or something like that type of stuff, but everyone knew when the owner was in, because it would roar around the car park and there was this skid and wheels and spin and dust, and he'd pull straight into the warehouse. He wouldn't park in the car park outside. He'd shoot in through the doors and spin into action and then run up the stairs and into his office. A bit of a show boy, if you like. But I'll never forget, we were all in the crew room having a quick coffee and a lunch break one day, and he walked down and he pulled away and pulled off the notice board some of the stuff that was already there, including the rotor and some of the things that were important. He pulled off a load of stuff and he pinned up this big poster. It's about an A3 poster of a speedboat. Well, that's not fair. It certainly wasn't a super yacht, but it was more than a little rib. It was a summer boat, I think as they call it, or a weekender or whatever. But a boat of some size without it being colossal and ridiculous and like Abramovich type stuff. And he pinned it up on the wall and he looked at the staff. There was about 40 or 50 people in the crew room. And he said, "Ladies and gents, I've just ordered that boat and this is how much it cost." And he wrote the figure across the bottom of the boat on its hull. "And unless we hit target, I'll be making redundancies so I can pay for it. So get back to work." And he walked back out again. And that was his motivation. That was how he G'd up the troops to be able to do more for him. He's just ordered a £300,000 boat, and bearing in mind, this is in the early 80s when that was a lot of money. And the only way he could afford it was if the company hit target. And if it didn't, he was going to make some redundancies, or at least the threat of some redundancies, so he could afford to pay for his toy. And he wanted us to quit our break early and go back to work so he could have a boat. Now let's put that into real context, or at least into your context. How are you motivating your staff? Where's the motivation in you one day giving up the ghost and saying, "Do you know what, I'm going to retire and bugger off to an island somewhere"? How does that sit with them? How does that motivate them to want to be "Thanks, boss"? Unless from the moment we employ a member of staff, we say, "And one day, all of this could be yours." You see, I've done 2 MBOs now. I've sold 2 of my businesses through a management buyout. And I've supported well over 50 other clients to be able to do the same also. And there's nothing more inspiring to a team than to think that not only are they in employment and they've got a career path, because as I've said, we've talked about how to be able to grow and scale and then exit. It's all about the Add a Zero stuff that I've written about in the books behind me. But to go from a job to a career, to be able to go from employed to subsequently a team leader, and then a department manager, and then subsequently a junior director, and then subsequently perhaps choose either individually or collectively to buy the business and own it. There's nothing more inspiring or endearing to being able to stay committed to the cause if you can have a hand in what's going to become something of yours in the future. And so earlier this year, having written Basecamp almost 10 years ago now, ironically, at the moment of recording this, I'm just in the final process of being able to amend and update the copy within Basecamp that's going to be released early next year, a new and improved versions to encounter for things like AI and remote working, which weren't a thing when I first wrote the book. But having written Basecamp almost 10 years ago now, and then Scale to Summit, the maroon book behind me also, about 3 years later, it's talking about how to move from growth, the blue book, to scale, the maroon book. Well, I'm really quite excited to be able to say that Living Your Legacy, the book, has finished being written and agreed with the publishers that it's going to become the final element of what's now a trilogy. How to be able to significantly and sustainably exit your business. We've done significant and sustainable growth in Basecamp. We've done significant and sustainable scale in Scale to Summit. Well, Living Your Legacy, how to significantly and sustainably exit your business. It's all been written. It's been submitted to the publishers. The publishers are delighted with the content and have agreed to make it a trilogy rather than just the duo that has been. And in early 2026, the 2 books behind me will be joined by a third as we're able to release how to be able to prepare your business with maximum asset value and the variety of different means of being able to exit, be it an MBO or to float or to be able to take it to a supplier or go on the open market. Or there's a whole series of methods to be able to prepare for exit and what to do and how to do, along with checklists and templates to prepare you to be able to get maximum asset value at the time of sale. Be that whether you choose to exit and just become a consultant to it and hand it over to the next generation, or whether you choose to be able to exit and say, do you know what, thanks very much, my time here is done, I'm off to do something else or something not at all. And I'm thrilled to be able to share that, having spent the last 12, 14, 15 months interviewing past clients, going back through all of the notes that we've collected along the way with regards to the what and the where and the when and the why and the how of each of the clients that we've helped support, that we've had consideration of who's going to be in the book and the stories to tell and share. We've got permission from the people that we've spoken to or written about. It's all gone through the collaboration phase with legal and financials to be able to ensure that all the information that we share is up to date and valid. The testimonials from our beta test group are literally coming in as we speak. Over the last 2 weeks, we've had some lovely feedback from our beta test readers who've already seen the copy. And it's now waiting for a publication date, which we're led to believe from the publisher is likely to be in the mid to the end of January next year. So, my question is simple. If you've already got staff, have you got an exit plan? And if you haven't, now's the time to pre-order the book. I'll put the link in the show notes. God bless, take care. I'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in to the Accidental Business Owner podcast with me, Jay Allen. If today's episode sparked a thought, challenged your thinking, or gave you a new tool to grow smarter, share it, rate it, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a moment of transformation. God bless, take care, and I'll see you again next week.